So I offer this practice as a meditation for some, but if you don't want to work with it as a meditation, perhaps you can just work with it as a contemplation. And if that's the case, I'd recommend that you have a journal or something to be able to write down as you're contemplating this. And this is really for people who are in a space where they found a bit of calm or a bit of acceptance with the situation at hand. If you have a lot of mind chatter going on and a lot of logistical things that you're working through, this might not be the meditation for you. This is perhaps for people who have more of an underlying anxiety, a bit more of a questioning, existential perhaps, just kind of what is this all worth? What is this all about? If you're in that space and you're able to take some time to go a little bit deeper, then I welcome you to this practice. So if you are going to do this as a meditation, go ahead and just close your eyes and make yourself comfortable. And if you're doing this as a contemplation, you may also want to close your eyes and make yourself comfortable. Or you can keep your eyes open and have your notebook in hand. And as usual, we connect into the breath. And you may have heard people talking about prana. And prana and the breath are often used simultaneously. But they're not the same thing. Prana is the energy that we get from all of life. We get from plants, we get from other people, we get from the sun. You know, it's everything. It's the life force that we're taking in through all of our openings and our skin. It's what keeps this physical being alive and keeps it here in form. And the breath is a vehicle for that prana. And so we can tangibly take in more prana when we take a deep breath in. And so often they're used kind of interchangeably. And the breath is the constant in our life, right? The breath is the constant in our life. And so I'd like you to think back about when you were an infant even. Most people don't have memories of being an infant, but you've seen pictures or you've heard stories. And so imagining yourself at that time as an infant. And as you grew, right, and your body continued to form, the inside, the outside, hair began to grow, teeth started to come out, the organs began to fully function. At some point, you began to make sounds, right? You weren't taught how to make sounds, but there was an impulse to make sounds, right? And then eventually you began to crawl. And again, crawling isn't something that you're taught, but there's this impulse. And you can see the evolution when perhaps if you have your own children or if you know small children, the growth that happens where there's just this natural intelligence that happens, that the voice begins to have expression, then the body has this impulse to move. And the body continues to grow, and then perhaps now you might have some memory, like go back to your earliest memories Maybe you were 3 or 5. And if you don't have any that young, that's fine. Just go back to your earliest memory that you have. And if you really don't have any, then think of some pictures or stories that you've heard about your childhood. And think about how many things have happened in your life that you had no idea you were going to be able to get through, right? Or think about an experience in your life and really remember what it felt like to be in that moment. You know, often we have very vivid memories or just flashes of memory. Like I have a flash of a memory of looking out a window. And I remember thinking at that moment, it's 1976. And probably because it was kind of a bicentennial year, that's why it was significant. But I remember standing in the windowsill looking out, thinking to myself, it's 1976. And I remember feeling that. So try to go back to a memory in which you can feel being there. And as you grew up into a teenager, you know, as a girl, you might have started to menstruate, and as a boy, your voice started to change. And these were all things that your mind was not involved in. It just naturally, organically began to happen. The intelligence within continued on. And maybe you broke a bone at some point, or you had an accident, or there was some kind of trauma in your life. And you continued on. And as you're kind of reviewing your life, pay attention to the fact that every day your body changed. You went from infant to toddler to small child to teenager to young adult to adult. The body was constantly changing. And your exterior environment changed a lot. How many times did you move house, move city? How many partners have you had? How many different friends have you had? How many different jobs have you had? But the one thing remained is this consciousness. There's a piece of you that's always been present, that has never gone away. It was with you upon arrival as a baby. And it has been with you through all of the changes that you've experienced in life. All of the external changes. But this peace, consciousness, or spirit has remained through all of it. Because nothing can affect that. This is the eternal consciousness. Nothing can affect it. You can have all different kinds of things happening to your body, happening to your outer life, beautiful things, horrible things, but nothing affects the consciousness. The mind changes, the thoughts come and go, but that existence, the spirit, remains. So uncertainty isn't actually new. We've all been experiencing it our whole life. We think that we've directed our lives. I made plans and I went to school to get this kind of job. I applied for the job. I got this job. But really, as you can see, on the drop of a dime, that can all be taken away, no matter how much planning you've done. And so, in reality, we've always lived with uncertainty. And yet, there's this natural intelligence in us that compels us to keep going. And if you can find trust in that, that can help you through this time. And when I say, can you find trust in that, that means working with your mind, because it's really the mind that's the issue. That's the only obstacle. The consciousness, the awareness, the spirit is already there. It doesn't need anything to prove itself. It's already there. So it's the mind that's the obstacle that says, I don't trust it. But if you're watching this or listening to this video or this audio, you've already made it through a lot, even in those times where you didn't think you would. And how did you do that? There is an innate intelligence in us that keeps us going. As I said, you arrived with it. It wasn't something that suddenly appeared inside of you. It is you. Truth be told, this is merely just a manifestation of it, but you don't need to get into that piece of it right now. And when the physical body decides that it's had enough, it will merely fade away, and consciousness will still remain. Think about when you go to sleep at night, right? The physical body finds its place to rest. And when you wake up in the morning, it's not confusing. You don't wake up going, who am I? Where am I? Because consciousness has remained. Even though the physical body has stopped, consciousness remains. It knows, I woke up and this is who I am. This is my house. That's my partner. Those are my kids. This is my name. I know where the coffee is. Consciousness remains. And it will continue to remain. If you go outside during this time, you'll notice that nature continues. Nothing has stopped. And depending on where you live in the world, perhaps there's blooming and blossoming that's happening in nature, or there's some contraction in nature, starting to go into hibernation if it's winter. But it continues. It continues. The only thing that's being affected right now is humanity, our minds and our physical bodies. but the consciousness of the whole planet continues. So perhaps you can remind yourself of this if you have these existential fears or these questionings about death and around death. Come back to your breath. Remember that within that breath, prana lives. And even if you no longer have that breath, remember that that is just the carrier within this body. But prana exists whether it's in this body or not. There is no beginning, no ending. And this physical body is just the ride we're on right now. The experiences we're having as this manifestation. Nothing can harm consciousness. Namaste.